He's getting in the shot. Little Lizardio wants to get on. Welcome to the Road Connection. Road to Connection, come on back. William, welcome to the Road to Connection.
Road to Connection.
Yeah. How's it going?
It's good, man. Thanks for inviting me to chat about loneliness. It's a big topic in a lot of my life, and so I'm happy about the mission and hope that it helps somebody out there.
Right on, yeah. We are here in Chicken Villa. Maybe the chickens will pay us a visit in Bali, Ubud, where we met a few months ago.
A few months ago now.
Yeah, I felt a good connection with you
Uh-huh.
straight away, actually.
Yeah.
I guess we kind of started when we met talking about topics we might talk about today a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when we first met, you opened up a lot about your. Maybe I asked you then, like, we talked about the podcast probably, and I maybe asked you like what your relationship to loneliness is.
Right.
I wonder if you want to share a little bit about like your journey with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like I've struggled with loneliness pretty much not in my entire life, but definitely a really large part of it. I think I'm doing a lot better nowadays, but, basically I moved schools right when kids were like forming cliques. I moved at like the age of 10. And I didn't have I didn't have a super supportive home environment. I definitely didn't have anybody I could really relate to at home. I didn't really have a ton of social skills either. And on top of it, I was like one of the only Asian kids basically in this new school. So I was feeling. It was in New York. Yeah, we moved to Ithaca, New York, and I just remember feeling like super out of place, super out of place. And that basically continued like through middle school and high school and even university to some degree. University was much better, but I feel like I would say until the age of 22, 23, I don't think I had a single person I really felt comfortable really confiding in. Yeah, I would say that's true. Yeah, I had a guidance counselor who was actually like, I could really feel her warmth and her care, but I just like was like so, I don't want to say like, I think I was traumatized to a certain degree, like where I actually didn't feel like I could trust like other people and like actually open up to them. I was a fragile soul. Yeah. And so I really felt like this real physical pain of loneliness through a lot of my life. Even though I was achieving like, on the external surface, like really successful doing, I went to an Ivy League, I went to like this top 3 management consultancy. I internally didn't actually feel like I belonged or had friends or like was wanted in this world. And so that led me down a whole journey of really wanting to understand this topic of connection and community and like overcoming loneliness. And that's actually a lot of what I do nowadays, like helping other people and myself become more aware of their own emotions and feelings and bring them out to create much more authentic, deep connections with other people. Because that, to me, it feels like that's the true solution to loneliness, really connecting on that deep level. And I mean, there's like the surface levels first of like just being around people at least. But I think ultimately, my belief is that we all seek this more deep emotional, like soul level, like I get you and you get me type of understanding.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's sounds like it was a challenging like 13 years. And I'm curious, like how conscious of the fact you were lonely you were. Were you aware like, oh, I'm feeling lonely at the age of 10, I'm feeling lonely at the 15 when I'm in university, I'm like, why don't I have any friends? Was it something you were like really noticing day to day, or is it something that upon reflection has become apparent to you?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I don't think I was fully aware of it at that point. If somebody said, "Are you lonely?" I don't think I would actually answer yes. Yeah, I don't think I would have because I didn't realize just what the other side like was, to be honest. And looking back, I can say like, wow, like I didn't really feel like I had friends I could like talk to things about, and like to me I would define that as loneliness now, but back then I just was like, oh, this kind of sucks.
So what was it like day to day, and like there's real utility in recognizing that if someone's in that place in life right now where they're, so it's possible to be lonely and not notice it. It sounds like, and my sense is it's really useful to be able to notice it. Do you recall the moment that you were like, oh shit, I've been lonely? And like, what was it that allowed for that noticing and that recognition?
Yeah, I'm not sure the conscious recognition was super helpful for me. Maybe it is, but for me, to be honest, it was more my felt sense was I just felt this like constant like sort of pain, and I could tell something was off. And I've been very in my head for most of my life, and I'm only really starting to get into my body a lot more. But even though I was so in my head, like I could still really feel, oh man, there's like something off, and I would actually really like to be like talking with that person over there, or like having a conversation, or feeling like hugged or like loved in some sort of way. And that was what really propelled me towards just continuing to seek, continuing to try to find a way out of this state for so long.
Yeah, I want to go into that with you in this episode, like all the different approaches you've taken and the things that have been really powerful for you to get out of that. I want to remain a little bit longer on this like period where you were not getting the connection, and I'm curious, like how. So you there were people around you, and there were people in your life. It sounds like you were at college, you were working in a big organization.
Yeah.
What was the nature of your interaction with these people, and did it ever approach something that felt nourishing? And yeah, what was that like in that period?
Oh yeah, this is actually a really good segue.
Nice.
I mean, certainly at work, I felt like it felt pretty surface level. Like I actually really desired to like have like these heartfelt connections with people at work, and that's part of why I actually left corporate life in the end, because I felt like it just didn't feel like there was a space available for it. The general population didn't necessarily want it, partly for practical reasons, and partly just because I think the system is sort of built to almost discourage those types of heartfelt interactions in some way.
Can you stick with that for a minute? I'm really curious, like, why is that?
I mean, I feel like, well, I mean, so when I was in a management consultancy, I mean, part of the client service ethos was to basically show that you were okay at all times, and to basically project that, you had your shit together, for lack of a better term. And sometimes I didn't have my shit together, and I just wanted to be in that. I just wanted to be in that with somebody. But I think other people were really scared of being like, of actually saying like, actually I don't have my shit together either, and like just being raw with it. There was always a bit more of a cynical like, yeah, I don't have my shit together. And it felt like it was this layer that prevented like more deeper, authentic type connection, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you know the Google study from like 2015, Project Aristotle. Did you hear of that one?
No, I haven't heard of it.
I probably oversight it. It's one study, but I feel like it's cited a lot amongst like people in authentic relating and stuff, and people who look at like organizational design and how to create companies where people feel safe. So it was about psychological safety, and well, it was about they want to work out what made their most effective teams most effective. And they studied over 100 teams over the course of about 2 years. And they found out that universally their highest performing teams all scored highest on psychological safety. This feeling of being able to bring their personal life to work, being able to name their personal challenges, their insecurities, their uncertainties about what they were doing in the workplace, all these things, like the freedom to be vulnerable, was the thing that actually made teams most effective. And yeah, that's kind of, it sounds like it's very counterintuitive in the corporate culture, and this is what I sense as well. And I do see things changing very slowly there, especially in perhaps more so in like smaller startup type environments. But it sounds like your experience there was very much that like there wasn't psychological safety to bring the challenges you were facing personally into the workplace, and thus it was really challenging to make real, genuine connections because you weren't able to show your true self.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right on, yeah. And so it was a segue, and I interrupted your segue. I don't know. Could you
no, that's
recall?
all
Do you
good.
recall where you were going with the segue?
I think so. It was about if it was about like the personal life too. Did I have something approaching that? And I think the major realization I have now that I didn't have then was there was actually plenty of opportunities, I think, to make friends and like be like intimately close with people. But I was honestly just so scarred from a lot of my own upbringing that I didn't let people in. Like I was literally preventing like people from getting close to me, and it wasn't like on a conscious level, but it was much more like subconscious. Like when people like showed interest in me, the normal thing I would do nowadays would be like, oh cool man, let's go chat sometime, let's go
Yeah.
hang out, like if I felt the same reciprocal interest back. But back then, and I still do it now to a certain extent, it's a spectrum. I would just like kind of like freeze and be like, oh my god, like I there's no way that they actually like what am I going to talk about? I have to have everything prepared, and like I would just get super worked up about it, and like I would just like hermit away instead of ever actually doing some sort of outreach. So I think the opportunities were totally there, at least in university. In high school, not as much, but definitely in university. Yet I was blocking myself.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant to recognize that. Yeah, I'm thinking about my own journey there and how it's been for me. I've always been very extroverted, but I've also been like a bit weird, and so there's been like a social rejection at times from my like excess energy and quirkiness, like in teenage years. And I'm wondering where that got in my way in relation to not having the connection I want. I think it probably left a legacy with me of like fearing reaching out sometimes, fearing rejection. Feels like that's just like been the case more so with women, like just yeah, especially in my 20s, just like this fear of making the move and naming the thing that's took a long time to work through. Feels like it's like the opposite end of a spectrum of like fear of connection, and one is is it so that freeze thing that was happening, and I think you mentioned maybe it's still happening. It still happens occasionally sometimes.
Occasionally, yeah.
Is that what is the fear underlying that, do you think?
I think it's like I think it's a good question. If I ponder it, I mean, my intuition is that it's two things. So one of them is like this perfectionist part of me that's like, oh, I have to have like everything ready, especially if the other person is like really attractive or has some sort of resources that, like skills that I want to develop, or like connections that like I would personally be interested in. I notice like there's this pedestal effect that happens. And I kind of like freeze up, and I'm like, oh my god, like, and internally I feel like this, I do IFS, and I have this guilty part of myself that says like, but like, are you sure that you are wanting to genuinely connect with them, or is this only from like wanting something from them? And I go into this whole like shame or guilt spiral around, is it right that I actually reciprocate this connection interest if it feels so functional, and I think that's actually blocked, and still probably does to a good extent prevent me from a lot of opportunities where yes, I do want something from somebody, but also in exploring that with them, there probably is almost inevitably going to be something else that emerges that is a genuine friendship.
Yeah, oh, that's such a great phenomenon to explore. Like, how much are relationships transactionary? Is that the word, transactionary? Transactional. Yeah. And so, and I think you can describe any relationship in a transactional manner, right? But through that, what transaction are we having in the course of our friendship? I think many transactions are happening, and
Between you and I.
between you and me, just thinking about us
sure.
right now. So we met like 4 months ago.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think initially there was a transaction of just like, oh, I'm excited to learn about your story. And then there was a transaction of like probably a little bit of relational tension. And that's an opportunity for me to like learn more about myself. And I don't know what the trade is. Maybe, yeah, it's interesting. What is the trade? A transaction is a trade, right? And so when I don't think about this explicitly very much, but I think I f-
I
there's some.
actually have, yeah. So my model is kind of like, I think I have this thing called like pillars of a relationship. Like basically for every relationship, there are pillars for like why that relationship exists. So for example, with my partner, like I mean, there's like the mutual growth together. Like I would be totally amiss to not say like great sex is like a total major part of the pillar too.
Excellent.
Like companionship, and honestly, like from a totally practical perspective, like financial like sharing, like splitting the cost
Yeah.
of things, like being able to try multiple things at a restaurant. And it's a smaller pillar, but it is still important to recognize that as a pillar. And I think the reason why I find this model really helpful is that things change over time, and the original pillars, the original reason for a friendship might actually be fading. And it's important to recognize that so that I can redesign the relationship, redesign the friendship. Like, what is my new intention for the relationship now that I've changed and that the other person has changed?
Beautiful. And I think what you're framing there is really true and important. It's like, it's not, it's in a sense, it's not a transaction. It's a co-creation. Like the thing you're sharing, you're both gaining from. And so, I'm wondering, where were we? We were talking about
We're talking about like
the,
university. And
there were these
blocking
opportunities for
ourselves.
connection, blocking ourselves, getting frozen in the moment,
Right.
and what fears underlie that.
Uh-huh.
And now and there was this IFS, which I talked about in episode 1 with Johnson, is internal family systems. This idea that
Right.
maybe there are different parts, and one of the parts you notice in yourself is this one.
Yeah, yeah. It was like this guilt around reaching out to people, because I was like, oh, like is it transactional if I do so? And like where I'm landing with this nowadays is that like, yeah, actually I do check. I'm like, if this is like purely transactional and like I don't actually have an interest in this person as a genuine human being, then yeah, let me check myself and like just recenter and see if I can settle into a different state, like where I'm like just curious about this person as a human and not necessarily what they represent to like me or like my specific goals, but just as a human. And that I found that to be quite helpful, because even at some of my most recent trainings, there are some really established people here. Like, I'm a personal development junkie, and like some of the events I go to, like, man, there's people who have been doing this for a long, long time. And I notice I can get like quite intimidated. I'm like, oh man, like why would they want to talk with me, or what do I have to offer? And then I get on the dance floor with them and we're just flowing, and I'm like, it's like in these moments that I realize again, like everybody is human, like regardless of how I perceive them or how they perceive them, everybody is human, and they all desire connection and like fulfillment in some way. And that is the common thread I feel like I can ultimately connect to anybody on, if there's alignment there.
Right. We can get in our heads so much and overanalyze, and all these fears take control, and then we just drop onto the dance floor and boom. And yeah, I'm curious. So there was a bunch of things you kind of did in your life other than dance when you came out of this period of loneliness. Some things fell into place. You took some other paths, tried some other things, and it led to the start of like a different relationship to connecting.
Yeah, I think like the real big turning point for me was after I graduated. So I hadn't sort of made a friend during university itself, but we had our ups and downs. And when I moved to New York City, like I was like, fuck, like I need to find somebody. And like as fate had it, like we just became roommates.
Oh, wow.
And
You kind of knew the guy.
I did, yeah.
You're like, I need a roommate.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I thought he was a cool guy too, but it was really practical at that point. And we ended up rooming together, and like this guy was just, he had like a really big heart for just like being there and like supporting people. And I had never felt that from like anybody in my life to that extent, at such a consistency. Like I'd just be bawling my eyes out, and he's like, what's going on, man? It wasn't trying to problem solve. It was just like, what's going on? I'm here with you. And just those, like, that simple gift of like full presence.
Yeah.
Like I had never felt that before. And to have that experience, like it allowed my like shell to start opening, and for me to start believing like, oh, like this type of belonging, felt sense of safety is actually possible with other people.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful you found that serendipity, because I guess it could have been that you moved in with a guy you kind of knew and they didn't bring any of that. And so it opened a doorway into seeing a new way of being. And it was it was like a 2-person studio kind of thing, a 2-person apartment. And
It was a 2-bedroom, but we made it into a 3 because we lived in New York and we Airbnb'd out the the third one. We were like broke college students, you know, like just freshly graduated, and like New York City is expensive, man. It's expensive.
just nudge to hold the microphone slightly further,
so.
probably. Yeah. Yeah, New York is expensive. Yeah, does that make sense? So you had a third person move in as well. How did that change the dynamic?
I mean, the third person would usually be in and out. Like it's, I mean, it's an Airbnb, and so yeah, we would occasionally have people like in the living room, like where we had like a bed and some dividers. But yeah, I think that it wasn't ever a super big issue. Like sometimes we included them, sometimes we just kind of did our own thing. We had some like fun guests actually, and otherwise we just kind of lived our life normally. It didn't affect the dynamic too much.
Awesome. Yeah, thinking back to my college days now, first time I lived with a group of people other than my family. I guess was backpacking when I was like 18, 19 in Australia.
Nice.
And that felt really like a supportive crew, 4 of us. Shout out. Actually, so my best friend from high school between the ages of like 14 and 23, I think he's going to be on the podcast next week.
Oh,
we
cool.
haven't spoken live time for like nearly a decade probably, but we've been sending long voice notes, and it's amazing how much we still feel really strong connections. So I'm really excited to have Dan on the podcast soon. We went to Australia together when we were 19, backpacked around for 3 months with a couple of other friends, and that was just a great adventure being this crew. Yeah, and I kind of had a crew at high school, but I felt like somewhat included and then somewhat excluded by other people in high school, and so I didn't have the worst experience, but there was definitely like some social rejection. And then from like 19 onwards, I had a pretty decent time, really. I was quite fortunate to live in a house with 5 people throughout university, and we were really close friends, and that was really cool. Yeah. And then there's been like loneliness on and off, moving back home to my hometown, living with my parents again when I was like my early 20s.
Yeah.
That was tough. I think that was the toughest time. And then moving abroad, and there's been this oscillation between living with others and living on my own. And living on my own, I think, yeah, so many people live on their own, man. And it's like, it can be nourishing, but I think you've got to be really embedded in a community or really like a huge amount of time on your own, more than most people do. Otherwise, it can be really tough. And so I'm living here right now, Chicken Villa, 2 friends, one from Taiwan who I met like 3 years ago on Bumble. We became friends, and Saeed, who I met in Bali like 18 months ago, and it's been what you described as your experience. Has been really supportive, and we check in, and when we're not doing good, we give each other support. It's only been a few weeks so far, but it's been so great to like create a little house together again. And we lived together for like a week, I guess. I almost forgot. It was like a week in January.
It was a good week.
How was living together there? So you lived there for longer.
A little bit longer, not that much longer. I think I lived there like maybe like 2 more weeks than you, like max.
Okay.
But it was good, man. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed that. I mean, I would say my experience of co-livings in general is that when they are intentionally done, like, and it's actively created, like not just joining an existing co-living, they tend to work out really, really well. But when the co-living, I was like, because I when I started nomading, I tried out other co-livings, and I was like, oh, well, co-living just probably works well. Like, I'm living with them.
Right.
And I found like I made like, in my entire like 3 co-livings, probably like 3-4 months total, I made like 1 friend that I like sort of keep in contact with.
This was like digital nomad co-living.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I find that just like there has to be some sort of intention, some sort of common thread to really make the co-living successful. I thought just living together with other people would be enough, but I'm realizing no, there has to be a common thread.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think you can get lucky sometimes, and you just move to with people who want the same things, who want to connect in the same way and spend a similar amount of time and nourish one another. But often I hear of people living together in apartments with random people and really not being socially nourished. And so, yeah, coming together to create something with intention. Like, I guess Johnson created that house in, and it was like, yeah, we're going to circle a lot and we're going to check in every day and like know what's going on in each other's lives, almost as if we were like romantic partners. We really know the nuance of what's happening in each other's lives every day.
Yeah.
And that was cool. It was really, really supportive.
It was cool.
Yeah. And so you moved to New York, and this was like a conscious decision. Like, I'm going to live with other people.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly just financial at first because I was just like, okay, like I could get like a $2,500 like studio, or I could pay $1,500 like for a shared 2-bedroom. $1,000 like is a lot, like, and so especially like when I was straight out of university, you know. And so that was more of a financial decision at that point. But nowadays, yeah, I'm finding that, yeah, these conscious, intentional co-livings add quite a lot to my life.
So before we started, we went through a few headlines. I wonder if you could remind me of those like key headlines, and we'll see which one feels alive right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about tantra and circling as like tools like for overcoming loneliness. We talked a little bit, of course, about my origin story, how I didn't feel like I had anybody until 22. Those are like kind of the big ones that stand out. I mean, I think I might have had some sort of framework around, yeah, there's like different pillars of connection. There's like basically my framework of, in like overcoming loneliness, basically the strategy is to expose myself to as many potentially compatible people as possible.
Beautiful.
And I talked about how there was like a couple of different pillars through which you could do that. I mean, so when I was like traveling, when I started becoming a nomad, this problem like really hit home because like I was moving to a new city. I literally knew nobody there. I didn't even know like what the city layout was most of the time. And so I had to figure out like how to make friends fast. Otherwise, like loneliness has a real mental cost to it. And so, and I don't like pain, mental costs if I can avoid it.
What is the cost?
It feels like it's just this constant like drain on energy. Like there's a real sense of like, I think my belief is that we all need connection. And like when we don't get connection, there's definitely a part of us like suddenly just really tired by it. Like there's, especially like with those of us with high anxiety, I would say I definitely had a lot of anxiety in the past, much less now. Yeah, I make this narrative that if I'm not like going out and talking with people, it must be because there's something wrong with me. Like because I'm not being social and love and wanted, there's must be something wrong with me, which is like total like classic shame trap. And like fuck that, like fuck that, like if you're listening to this, fuck that, like it's everything is a matter of effort, and it's really rarely ever about me, or it's rarely ever about you.
What's the effort?
It's just putting myself, I found I was just putting myself out there, like when I actually gave myself at bats as opposed to just, you know, talking myself out of even going to bat. Like, you know, I actually found a surprising number of hits. Like, you know, I tell you the story about Mexico City. Like when I went to Mexico City, I made a Facebook post, and I really tried because, you know, I fucking worked at a management consultancy. Like everything has to be like 120% perfect before it's presented. But I put a lot of effort into this post. I like, here's who I am. These are my interests. This is what I'd like to do. I put like an engaging photo of me, and actually it worked.
Where
like
did you post it?
in Mexico City.
Oh, you posted it on a specific group on Facebook?
Yeah, exactly. I posted it in Digital Nomads Mexico City or something like that. And I actually got a couple of hits, which was great. And actually, one of the guys that I met there ended up being a good friend when I was in Mexico City. We don't keep in much contact now, but it solved the problem for like when I was actually there. And if I actually talked myself out of like just not even posting, like being like, oh, no one's gonna post anyways, then I would have never met this dude. So yeah, that's kind of my short story.
Yeah, and you didn't even have to like go out of the house to do this. You just put together a post and then saw what came, and you put a lot of effort into it. You made it appealing. You told people about yourself, and I imagine, and some people were like, "Yeah, that guy sounds cool. I want to connect."
Yeah.
Then you end up meeting in real life.
Yeah, exactly. I actually met two people from that post. Now that I think about it, one of whom actually I still keep decently in contact with. I did actually meet them later on. One of them like just as at a coffee place, and another one we just worked out in the park.
Yeah.
And that was pretty dope.
So, yeah, it's making me think of my time in Mexico City, where I had a bit of a lonely time. Actually, I didn't make a Facebook post. Which it could have, what I did, probably the person I hung out with, the person a little bit who I just met randomly. I was like in the laundry.
Yeah.
And I think there's like, for me, I sometimes because if I've been a bit too alone for too long, it's harder to have that activation energy to interact with someone new.
I see.
And so if I can have the mindset of I'm going to be talking to new people, then I can just lean into it and feel good about it.
Right.
And there was someone in the laundry, and I just said hello, and then we became friends, and we started chatting, and we hung out, and we went out in Mexico City a couple of times, and it's just like it can be that easy. Just when for me, when I take on the mindset, shift my mind into like I'm going to have an openness to connection. I'm going to remember that when I see someone who's of interest to me, I might just ask them a question or say something to them, and so often that can lead to connection. Yeah. But I think it doesn't always solve the community in a new place thing. And so you point towards posting online, and it reminds me this last week I've been a bit like isolating myself, and for me it's like my energy gets low sometimes when I'm working out hard and I'm trying to do work, and then it gets to a time when I'm free and like, oh god, I don't have the energy to get out there and meet new people.
Yeah.
And what I know is if I pre-commit, I have to go. If I paid money, I mean, I sometimes still back out. But yesterday I pre-committed to an event, and I really didn't want to go. It's like, it's I can just chill this evening. Like I have been doing too many evenings in a row.
Right.
I was like, no, I'm gonna go. And I just within 10 minutes, I thought I was getting sick. I thought I was physically I think I might have COVID. Was one thought that crossed my mind. I was like, Saeed's been sick. Have I got COVID? I'm feeling down. I've been there I didn't think I had COVID. I wouldn't have gone if I thought. But I definitely thought I'm feeling a bit ill. And I went, and within 10 minutes I felt great. And it was like, oh, I've got social connection, makes me feel better.
Yeah.
It's like that's like the understatement of the year. And like today I've just been feeling pretty damn good. I feel like when I don't get enough connection, I flow down, and then I get some connection, and I feel better again, both emotionally and physically. And I think going out to events is especially ones which are around which have a dynamic of like real interaction is so useful for me. Great. So you went to Mexico City. You found some people nomading on the whole.
Well, I actually want to touch on one point. You said specifically events that have lots of interaction. I think that's actually really key, because I've been to sometimes people are just like, just go out to events and go out to like a talk or like a poetry slam or like a music show, and I'm like, there's not opportunities to connect. There's actually a skill to facilitators can actually build in like connection into whatever they're facilitating, and sometimes the event itself is not built for it, or other times like the facilitator just isn't.
Yeah, I get real frustrated. I went to a workout, like a group workout class like a month ago when I was in Canggu, and I was like, oh great, I'm going to a gym, I'm going to meet some new people, and she's like, what's your name? And just went around, name. It's like a single word answer. Everyone was in this zone. It seemed of like not. I don't know. I imagine people go there because they want connection, but the way she like elicited the information led to everyone to say the name. And even I said my name. I was at the end. Usually I would have like tried to bring a bit more connection with my answer, but I somehow got sucked into that dynamic. And then we all worked out. No one spoke to each other, and it was over. I was like, oh man, I didn't mean anybody that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people do go to group fitness classes just for like the actual fitness component. But I would agree. I think a lot of people go like hoping for some sort of social connection as well. So there definitely is some sort of art to it. There's something you said earlier too, which I want to circle back to, but it's kind of eluding me right now. So yeah, maybe we'll save it for whenever it comes up.
It was in that last part I just spoke.
Yeah, there was a lot in there. I'm trying to.
Meeting new people in Mexico City and
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it'll come back.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
see.
I actually have something. I mean, you spoke about like just pre-committing actually, and I think this is something Tim Ferriss like talks about. Like he has this past year review process where you write down basically your peak positive and your peak negative moments, and in order to make sure your next year actually goes quite well, it's not like I have this goal. It's like literally like just buy it in, like lock it in, like now. If you're like, I really enjoy singing. It's just like just pay for a pack of singing lessons like right now, and just lock that in so that there's like you can use sunk cost fallacy to to basically pull yourself in a very positive direction.
Nice. And if one is like asking that question with an eye on connection, when did I feel most connected? What things allowed me? Yeah, when did I feel the best friendship? Maybe there's something in there which you can book into your next year as well.
Yeah.
So more with that specific angle.
Yeah.
Great. I might journal on that. What was the thing?
I have something
Yeah.
else too. I mean, so you're also talking about how you like feel your energy like change, and I think this is actually some sort. I forgot what phenomenon it was, but it's some scientific phenomenon. It's been documented, like where we literally actually have more energy around other people, and then as soon as we like leave the social atmosphere, there's a bit more of a crash, and. Yeah, I wish I could be more specific on it, but like what you mentioned definitely lines up with, yeah, a pretty common phenomenon. Just being around people is very energizing just by
Yeah.
itself. Ideally, like people that you get along with, but
Right. Because I think people who would like put themselves high on introversion might say that like their energy gets drained quite quickly in social interaction. But I think there's a claim to be made that like putting yourself in the environment that are with people that can be nourishing, and that might be a bit more of a challenge to find what kind of environment that is for someone who's quite introverted. It might not want to be like a less likely to be like a loud club environment.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something that's even silent. Maybe it's something that's much slower. Like finding that environment that nourishes but also has a social component can be really important for depending on how you navigate social connection.
yeah, I actually, what you mentioned, this whole introversion piece is actually something I talk about with my clients. I think there is
Do you
actually
want to share what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm an emotional resiliency coach, and basically I help hyperachievers overcome like professional anxiety, reduce in professional anxiety, and increase a personal expression, like their own like authentic expression, so that they live like deeper, more productive, more fulfilled lives. And
And
you
that's
know,
what you've done for yourself.
that's exactly the same path I've walked. That's why I like feel so passionate about for other people. That's why I like to do what I do, because it feels like it's giving back to myself in some way as well. But yeah, so anyways, like one of my clients is, a fairly introverted dude, and it's actually something we've talked about in our work together. This idea of like interactions, and I asked him a question. I'm like, has there been interactions where you've actually left like more energized? And the answer, of course, was like yes. And so I think that alone can like kind of dispel the myth that introverts like find all interactions draining. I think as an introvert, as an identified introvert myself, the real key is just figuring out what interactions are actually energizing, what interactions are draining, and then designing my life to have more energizing interactions.
Yeah. Is there also an element of how do I want to show up in that environment?
Tell me what you mean by that.
So maybe you choose an activity that you deem is like energizing for you, such as I don't know, salsa,
Yeah,
for example.
sure.
Or maybe let's choose a different one, like a dinner parties. For some reason, you like dinner parties.
Right.
And then is there a question of, well, how do I maybe if I don't think about what attitude I'm going to come to this dinner party with, I might default into being a bit too quiet or into asking lots and lots of questions but not talking about myself. And maybe there's like, oh, what can I lean into that's a bit different than my default way of being? Can I lean into sharing a bit more about myself or like when I notice I'm being a bit quiet, like bringing myself to talk a little bit more or something like this, or maybe a whole wide variety of different like attitudes one might want to cultivate in a different environment. Is that something you think about much?
I don't think about that too much. I think what you're talking about, noticing like your own patterns and like, oh, like I notice I'm kind of going into this quiet state right now. My approach on this is I actually check in and I'm like, is this quiet state actually something I genuinely want
Yeah.
right now? And if it is, then I just fully sink into it. But if it's like, actually, no, actually, I would like some interaction, that's when I actually push myself to like try something a little bit different to shake it up in some way.
Yeah, beautiful. Checking in with yourself in the moment. Yeah, I did that yesterday actually. There was a moment where I felt a bit disconnected, and I just closed my eyes and meditated. I mean, it was like an environment where it didn't feel too weird to close my eyes and meditate. But I think in some environments you might feel a bit. If you're like identifying everyone's talking, you're sitting there with your eyes closed, you might feel a bit strange. But don't have to close your eyes to introspect. No one knows you're doing it.
Mood, like, it's totally normal, like,
Right.
totally normal.
Indeed. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I am feeling some like a little bit of fear. Everyone's like in these sort of little pods of interaction, and I can't see anywhere that I can easily like insert, and I don't want to like be weird and like break into someone's interaction. I don't. I think that was probably the main fear. And I just noticed that I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna walk around and see if something, because it was quite a big space, and I'm just gonna see what happens, see if I encounter something rather than just sitting here, slightly unconsciously, just like sinking into a micro isolation within an event of more connection. And what that did, that led to me bumping into somebody who I spent the next 2 hours in deep connection with. And yeah, so it's like, oh, I just brought some movement. I'd like went on a little exploration. I was going picking up some watermelon. I'll just see if I bump into anybody, and boom. And they asked me how am I doing, and I shared openly how I was doing. I was like, I'm feeling a bit disconnected, and they shared they were feeling the same. And we sat down and we talked about it, and we found connection with each other in that. And it was, yeah, I think that moment of answering honestly when she asked me, how's it going?
Right.
That was crucial.
Right.
I didn't just say, yeah, it's fine, good. I was like, I feel like a bit like when I was like 15 at a party and everyone's like making out and I'm not included, and I just named that.
Right.
And that's just like such an invitation then to real connection.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's really beautiful. I feels there's like two major points you hit on there that I think about for myself a lot too. One is like just inviting movement. I find that like sitting is often a very sedentary, like kind of there's an inertia that gathers around it. And I find that actually being in motion, it creates more collision opportunities. And so that's quite powerful.
Collision opportunities, I like that phrase.
Exactly. And yeah, the second was like, yeah, as you said, like you allowed yourself to actually be connected with, and that's quite beautiful. It reminds me of how I was saying earlier on, I was like, I was shielding myself, and that shielding actually prevented me from getting what I actually wanted.
Yeah, you can have a collision, but your shield's up and you bounce off.
Right.
And so it's like, well, that collision didn't do what I was hoping it would do because I didn't allow it. I didn't allow the merger or the stick.
Right.
And so I love those two. Shields up, no collision opportunity. Take a collision opportunity, put your shield down, and see what happens. And putting the shield down is hard, though.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious to know more about how you navigate what sort of core things come up in the coaching often, and what other themes. Yeah, what goes on there?
I mean, related to like putting the shield down, I think there has to be this felt sense of like self-resource, like even if this person like doesn't take my invitation, I will be okay. And that is actually that's just personal work. That's like a lot of, I don't have like a clear formula for it except for just IFS therapy, honestly. Just like really like coming into connection with these core, like really wounded parts of myself that have felt like rejected or abandoned or unwanted or unlovable, and just really feeling how I also have in IFS we call it a self that is able to just feel like this deep sense of like compassion and like confidence and clarity and calmness for this like very wounded part. And when the more and more I allow myself to feel the self, and the more and more I like step into this state of being for other people, the more and more I'm able to just access it for my own self. And so there's really something to this whole Buddhism practice of like practicing compassion for other people. Like if you can't extend compassion for yourself, extend it to other people, and that's the same muscle. It's the same muscle that you will ultimately use for extending compassion to yourself.
Beautiful. So was that part of this journey for you in your 20s, and like the compassion thing, or was that something that's come later?
That was definitely something that came later. It feels like it sort of came in bits and pieces. Like I got it from my friends, but it was an external source, and it wasn't until like I would say like not even like maybe it was only like maybe like 3 years ago that I really even discovered this idea of self compassion.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually really incredible in some ways, like to know that like once you discover this idea of self compassion and really feel it a couple of times, like change it just happens so fast. And so yeah, that's honestly I feel like that's the message of hope, if any, not anything else.
It's amazing how many people aren't. It's another one of those things that like you can just navigate your whole of your life without even realizing isn't there. And when it's noticed that I don't have compassion for myself, and the right work is done to move through that, it shifts everything. I see so many people who really seem to not have it and aren't aware of it, and it's really, it's a real blockage to connection with others. So one can work on one's compassion for oneself or one's compassion for others, and they support one another. I think there's also this, for me, working on like my compassion for others has been really big in the last year. Like relationships that have had real breakdowns, and just seeing where I can fully extend empathy for that person's perspective has allowed me to let go of judgment and feel nothing but compassion and love for these people. And that has changed how I go about life with relationships that haven't yet broken down as well. And it feels like to me like it really it's in combination with curiosity a lot. Like where can I not leap to judgment and sink into my own story of the breakdown, and rather like tell me more about what's going on with you, or in the relationships that perhaps are not in connection anymore. Where can I extend my curiosity to like really think, well, what is going on for that person? But in connection, it's like, what's going on for you? I'm feeling this. Maybe I'm feeling pain. Maybe I'm feeling anger. Maybe I'm feeling sadness. And rather than just like sinking into that immediately, sinking rather into the curiosity for the other.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really, really, really key here, and I find myself relearning this lesson all the time. It's like curiosity feels like it's the root of compassion. It feels like it is like the precursor to compassion. Yeah, actually, I think that's a realization I just had now. Like, it feels like when I get curious about why the other person is the way they are, suddenly, like, when I understand the situation they're in and the factors that I'm like, of course they would be that way. Like, it makes sense. Like, I would be the very same way. I'm a human, too.
Yeah.
And it, like, brings me to this common sense of humanity. And actually, this totally extends for, like, you know, myself or, like, yourself as well. Like, when I get curious about, like, like, why did I end up, like, for example, you know, laying in bed and watching videos instead of, like, going to work? Like, it, like, brings this realization that, like, there's just this constant, like, you know, overbearing voice of, like, you need to do something, you need to do something, you need to do something. And to realize that this voice is just constantly just, like, it's like a fucking, like, hammer just, like, wailing at me. Of course, like, I'm gonna shrink in. So yeah, curiosity is definitely the seed of compassion for both others and as well as the self.
Beautiful. Just gonna check the cameras again. I realized I didn't hit focus on my screen. I wonder how it looks focused in there. I'm just gonna touch the screen nevertheless. See if that. Okay, good. All good. Low battery, 20% remaining. Close. Still recording. Good.
Right.
50 minutes in.
Okay, cool.
I feel like there was something I noted.
The curiosity, seed of compassion.
Yeah, I wonder where we want to take the conversation. I feel like going more on your journey. So it's been a while since you were 23, a little while, and there's been progress there through living in New York, digital nomading, finding you could reach out, advertise yourself, and people will actually take a punt on connecting with you because they want connection too. Are you still digital nomading? You're kind of based in Bali now, right? You've decided to stay here for.
Yeah, I mean, to be really honest, I mean, you can make friends as digital nomads, and there's like a certain thrill to it, but I found it just really exhausting over time, and I decided, okay, I just need to settle down and just have the base, like, and just be around people that I know are going to have similar interests or have a similar path to me. And yeah, Ubud's probably been like one of the most nourishing places for that. It feels like a lot of people are on this journey of self-awareness and self-compassion, and it's quite beautiful. There's a transmission from people here.
Yeah, where have you found your closest connections in Ubud? When you first came in December for the first time, or I forget your journey in Ubud as well, what that's like.
Yeah, I actually first came here last April, so it's about my Bali-versary right now. I actually had broken my right ankle in Thailand in January of last year, and I was a wreck. But I had to get out of Chiang Mai, and so I arrived in Bali with like this. I still had my crutches, and I was just like,
Damn.
I need to leave Chiang Mai like now. My mental health was going down the gutter. And yeah, I actually, to be honest, I found it quite challenging. Like, I would say as a general rule, like, it takes me anywhere from like 2 to 4 weeks to really find friendships, like sustainable community, and to feel like I actually am not alone in a new city. And yeah, so there's a couple of different points we can go to from here. One of which is like I found hobbies to be like the most sustainable way to actually make friends and to make really high quality friends. There was another direction I could have gone, but maybe we go down that.
Let's go down the hobbies route. Yeah, and yeah, there was something that was like how long it takes to make connection as well. That maybe we'll touch back on in a minute, because I think that's an interesting one that can be expedited in certain ways. But let's touch on hobbies. So you came to Ubud, and it took you a while to get connected here.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, to the point I made earlier, like I was going to some like yoga barn like classes and like, yoga classes or whatever. But the issue was like there wasn't any facilitated connection there. Like people go to yoga, they like do the yoga and then they leave. And I'm like, I mean, great. Like I like that too, but that's not the primary reason I'm here, or it's not like one of the main things I came here for. And so I realized real quickly, okay, I need some other hobbies that are much more interactive. And I've done acro yoga for a while, so I made some friends through that, but I found myself increasingly not as in connection. And I realized I had to like actually realize that I am just like really into self-awareness nowadays, and like nonviolent communication. And so actually I ended up finding community in authentic relating and circling here, where every Tuesday, every Wednesday there'd be a group of people that would meet up and just basically talk about what's present for them. And it was literally a structure to like create connections. And I found that really, really helpful. But even outside of that, I would say just as a general rule, it feels like hobbies, like even if it's just paddle, they're just incredible ways to just bond over something, to have an excuse to get together.
Yeah, there's something for doing like movement with people, whether it's sport or dance or whatever, that it's just like really connective. You're in the zone together. And then I think what I found with like the circling and the authentic relating community is I've made, because the events are really interactive, you get to know people well and you spend time with each other outside of those worlds. And I guess that's ultimately how we met through. Yeah, I guess you met.
I met Johnson through Awakened Leadership.
Okay.
But
So yeah, retreats, I think.
retreats are a big one. Yeah, whenever you spend a dedicated amount of time in a space in a container together, there's bound to be something that
It's
happens.
huge. I think, yeah, like you go to a retreat, which might be at least a single day and maybe like 7 full days together. And so I think there's something to be said for like starting at the same time as other people.
Right.
You can arrive into a new place, but everyone's been there a while, and there's not like this activation energy amongst everybody.
Right.
But you go to a new phenomenon and a retreat that's just beginning, and everyone is in the same boat. No one knows anybody,
Yeah.
and so you all need to connect. And so retreats, I've never been to a retreat where I didn't like make. They're some of the most connective environments by far, because everyone's intensively together in this temporary community for the same purpose, doing the same thing, with a shared mindset in some way, whatever the angle is that the thing's on, whether it's a dance retreat or an authentic relating retreat or I guess not a silent meditation retreat. There was no talking, but even on my
Even Vipassanas.
man, I ended up living with Mickey, who was on. We did a 10-day silent meditation. We didn't speak to each other for 10 whole days. We just saw each other walking through the woods.
But
At the end, we spoke, and he had a room going in Berlin, and I wanted to move to Berlin.
Oh,
He drew me a map with apples of Berlin on a plate. He's like, "That's my district," and I ended up moving to Prenzlauer Berg. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I lived there for 2 months in a little like young couples kind of area. It was a nice apartment, and that was a struggle. Connection wise, it was really nice to live with Mickey, a wonderful guy and like quite social as well.
Yeah.
But I was at work, and then work is an obstacle. I think it's like if one is working a lot, it's tiring, and then there's time zones. I was working on like California time in Berlin, and I just couldn't find the time and the energy to make the connections I wanted. And maybe I wasn't aware enough at that point how much I need to embed in community, and I need to go something regularly.
Yeah.
That's how I find connection, and I didn't do that there. I'm lost.
This is a bit more of a non sequitur, but I think one of my major realizations for overcoming loneliness was that I actually don't need to have that many friends. I don't need to have that many friends, because I realized really quickly when I was nomading, all I really need is like one close friend or just a couple of like friends that I'm like decently close with, and that's all that's like really needed, like 2 or 3, and like that's enough.
What does that open up?
Well, what does that open up?
What changes when you have 2 or 3 friends versus no friends?
It feels like, there's a consistency. There's like a safety of like, oh my God, like if I'm like alone, like I don't have to start from scratch. Like there's like these warm leads that like I would actually just genuinely enjoy spending time with. And like it changes the game from like, I have to like find somebody, I have to go out there, like put myself in this unknown space and like hope that I land something well and spend this time and money and effort to like, I've got like people that I've vetted out before. Now I wonder what else there is.
Right.
I wonder if they're just free today.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can just go out to so in Uber there's some quite social restaurants where people just chill out, and you can go there on your own. But if you're not feeling that like energy to connect with random people, but you want to go with some friends, that makes it much easier. And then there's still the opportunity to like widen the circle of friends if that's something that's desired. Or you want to go to an event and you're like, oh, I don't want to meet new people, go with some friends, and it just makes it a little bit easier. It makes me think of this like trajectory I think of from lonely isolation up to having friends, and what's beyond that. And I think like the sort of apex of this spectrum is having the most nourishing friendships and community that one can have, and like what does that look like? And for me, I think I mapped my whole life month by month, and I looked at the times when I was most fulfilled, and I think there were some brief moments when I had like all these concentric circles. So there's this thing called a Dunbar chart, which is like concentric circles of friendship, with the center being your closest connection, and then very, like 2 or 3 very close friends. I forget the exact numbers. Maybe there's like a next one is like 7 to 15, and then like 40, and then like there's a circle which is like 150-ish, and then there's like 2,000. And then there's I think there might be a circle beyond that, which is for me like being in a city or something, or being in a place where there's a wider community even than that. And I think there's been a few moments in my life where I had a romantic partner, I had 2 or 3 very close friends, and then I was part of a group of like 10 to 70 people, maybe even 10 to 100. And within those bigger sized ones, like when I was volunteering in the Philippines, I lived with 100 people. Within that 100 people group.
Damn, it's huge.
Huge. That was up there with the best times of life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And within that 100 though, there's like you get these subgroups, and it's easier to find just easily people who you like gel with more, because you don't have to like force yourself into connection with someone who isn't quite on the same wavelength vibe. And then beyond that, being in that kind of like, whether it was a sports team or a volunteer project, it's like, oh, what's beyond that? Is there a wider community? I think living in Taipei, there's like this network of expats and people involved in the kind of English-speaking community, which is probably a few thousand people.
Okay.
And there's all kinds of events within that. And then beyond that, there's like the whole city or the whole country. And so I think having all those circles is like, maybe it's not necessary. Maybe it's like over optimization to try and like have all that filled out. But I found when I felt the best, it's like I've had all those things going for me at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I my personal view is that like it's gonna differ quite a bit for everybody. Like I feel like, you know, for me, I'm like actually very happy with like 1 to 5 like really close friends, and like, you know, a couple of people that I sort of know around the community. But to me, like the depth of the friendships like around me like are absolutely critical. And I think that's true for a lot of people. I think everybody like wants deep friendships, but my sense is that depth versus like volume is actually a difference. I'm not sure if it's just between introverts and extroverts, but it really feels like there's a difference in like the optimal, the ideal like community.
Yeah, beautiful. It's really, really great. Maybe even I'll call it feedback. It's because like it's easy for me to get sucked into my own perspective as someone who is pretty high on extroversion. I think I'm like uncertain how extroverted I am now. I think I used to think I was like 99th, and then I thought I was like 95th percentile, and now I'm like, fuck, I need a lot of regeneration time on my own actually. So I don't know, but I do love, and maybe my favorite environments are those like which are really like, I love conferences with like 3,000 people in them where we're all day every day for multiple days, or festivals with like 5, 10, 20,000 people, and I'm just able to just be interacting with people in whatever way the interaction is happening, in a way that feels that really gives me a lot of it's like it's a peak state, and so maybe it's not like a sustainable state, and maybe it's not the same thing as like the kind of nourishing connection that's, I think, necessary. Maybe it's more of a hobby almost. Like I love that I get a peak state from being around loads of people in a high energy environment. It's really joyful for me, and it also like pulls that sort of creativity from my character. It feels like I get to embody a different character, and when I find other people who are in the same wavelength, I think that's how Johnson and I first bonded. Probably we were at an EA conference in Prague in 2022, and we were probably two of the more extroverted, but for sure, people in that conference, and we both had our really high energy, and we were just like firing ideas and humor, and we just bonded immediately within this sort of environment of loads of people.
Right.
And so perhaps it's actually not like a necessary. What was that sound?
Not sure.
Some kind of wild jungle animal. Yeah, useful. And so what is necessary for apex, contentment, ease, well-being, fulfillment in terms of connection? Maybe for some people it is just having a couple of close friends, and actually that's all that is needed. Is that the hypothesis you're laying out?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about like my like ideal, my ideal level of community and social connection, it's like basically living with like anywhere from 1 to 5 like close friends, and like having some sort of common intentionality like around self-awareness and like personal development, and just being there for each other emotionally. And of course, like having like an external life or outside of it as well. But I mean, for me, it's like so interesting when you describe like festivals. I was like, I just get overwhelmed most of the time. I just get like so many new faces. Oh my God, like so tiring to like meet somebody. I don't know if I'm going to see them again. Yeah, I find it actually quite tiring. So for sure, differences.
I'm going to turn the light on. Low battery, 10%. Ooh, 10%. Well, let's try and wrap up within 5 minutes. Very interesting. Extroversion in festivals. What's going on there? I think one thing is within that extroversion in really busy environments where I'm meeting, probably talking to 100 people. Maybe I'm having like intense 1 minute to 1 hour conversations with like 50 plus people in one day. I think there's a hunt there. I'm like, I want to find people that I vibe with, that I can continue. Well, I think there's a present moment joy. It's just a game. It's playing the game of connection.
I see.
And within that, there's both practicing. I think I love it because I get to practice how to connect. And then the practice itself is really fun. And then it's like, oh, well, some of these are going to actually be people that remain potentially in my life. I was going to say something else about that. Damn it. I feel like derailed. Where should we go from here for the last 5 minutes? So there's 23 onwards, lonely, disconnected, started finding, you're in Bali now, found some close, yeah. You're in Bali now. You came back like last year after breaking your ankle.
Yeah.
Now you're back again. What's going on in this journey to connection, the road to connection?
What's going on the road to connection? I mean, well, first off, I want to say I was just inspired by how you described your approach to festivals, because I actually do feel a lot of what makes something energizing or tiring is actually the frame with which I approach something. And like when I like approach somebody with the intention of like figuring out like, okay, like, are we going to like be best friends or not? It does create a bit of like this binary high like threshold like gate. Whereas, you know, if you approach it more as like, oh, I wonder how I can connect with this person, that is still within my own boundaries. And I'm actually viewing this entire thing as like a hunt for people that I'm going to connect with. I think it actually becomes actually quite exciting. I could really see why that'd be fun. And I actually maybe want to try that out at the next big gathering. Tonight I think I'm just gonna watch a movie at party. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be inspired by this. But yeah.
So what's going on in Newport?
What's going on
for you in life and connection?
What's happening now? I mean, like for me, my major the next major like thing I'm really overcoming right now is just putting myself out there more. I have this whole perfectionist side of like where I feel like everything I post has to be like this perfect version of myself. And to be honest, I'm like becoming much more comfortable and realizing like it's far more connective to just show like an unfiltered, like authentic version of myself rather than trying to like craft this perfect image. So I think that's what's next for me, just putting myself more out there and like offering more of like what I do to the world. And then, you know, just from a personal perspective, I also feel like there's this problem, well, not problem, like this interesting challenge I'm like really grappling with in my life, in relating to people that aren't necessarily from the authentic relating world. It feels like the formulaicness of the language creates a lot of like safety and structure within like authentic relating containers. But you know, when I say, for example, like NVC is like the perfect example of this.
Nonviolent communication.
Yeah, nonviolent communication is the perfect example. Like when I say to somebody who is versed in NVC, like when you did X, I felt Y because I have a need for Z. Like they get it. But like when I try this on somebody in the wild, they just get pissed off.
Yeah.
They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Right.
Like what the hell is going on with you? They get
Right.
angry. And I'm not sure how to bridge this gap yet of like intention and results, like for people that aren't as familiar with it. So that's my next goal.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's something I've encountered as well and introspected on a bit. And yeah, I remember that blowing up for me once. I was like really frustrated with a friend. I laid it out through the MVC formula and they were just like, what the? They were like, just immediately very angry. And I think what I realized was it's too much information in one chunk. It's like just take it. You don't need to lay everything out immediately. That's what I felt. I felt like if I had done that differently, I might have just shared maybe just share my feelings first, and in a way that really helped them to just feel what I was feeling, instead of like naming my observation and my feeling and my need and a request all in one go. It's like, why are you asking for that? I gave you this. This is not, and it's like there's too much going on there, and the person will automatically often just notice the thing which gives them the most discomfort, and that's might then lead to some conflict.
Right,
So it does the
right.
exact opposite of what's intended sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah.
great observation. And so you're just like working with how to bring these tools out of their container and into the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess that's something I've been really working on actually for a while now as well. And I think I found challenging in the beginning, and I'm finding greater ease with in multiple ways. Yeah, still a challenge sometimes. I think something you do really well, which I've tried to take on and do more so, and would like to do much more so still. And you even did it in this conversation a bit. I think is just like reflecting what you heard. You do it so well. I think you do it better than anyone I've ever met. You so often reflect and share impact. You're like, yeah, I heard that this thing. Yeah, maybe you give it. I think you probably you can probably do a better like summarization and maybe an example of like what that's like, if you know what I mean.
I can take my best stab at it. I mean, what I'm understanding you say is like you're feeling heard, and like when I play back, like when I make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, I say like I heard you say this, and my understanding is that like when I reflect it back to you, it makes you really feel heard. And for me that feels joyful, because like I like to know. Oh man, that was
What
a
was
lot. Just another day in Ubud. It's just another day in Bali.
That was scorpion.
Oh, well, that was a scorpion.
No, but it had some pins to like.
Oh damn, that's wild. Yeah, just another day in the jungle. Another day in the jungle. It is wild to me to think about the fact that we actually live like in a jungle.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a little pan in the video and so you can see the green all around.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Well, that was very meta. You did the thing on the thing that was the phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly.
That I feel. I mean, it was a good example. I feel like it might be a bit complex because you would literally you were doing the phenomenon on me talking about enjoying the fact that you do the phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe as a better example, like for example, I was in an online circling session recently, and somebody said something like, I've never really had anybody like that actually listen to me, and I felt this just deep resonance within me. I was like, my God, like I get it, because I've been there, and I still do feel like that sometimes. And so I was like, what I'm hearing you say, and I don't always do it, but sometimes I will. Like what I'm hearing you say is like, you're experiencing something really meaningful to you right now, and I feel a lot of joy in seeing that. I like really celebrate that you like actually feel like this is a space in which you can like express, and there's something deeply connective about not only the person like having their experience affirmed, but also hearing about how it impacts me. And my story around this is because like we're always evaluating, like we're always looking for safety. We're always evaluating for safety. And so when we know what the other person is feeling, not just like what they're thinking, but what they're feeling, there's a real felt sense of safety and just like a relaxation that happens.
Yeah, brilliant. That was a great example, and you do it so much, and you do it so well. So it's something I'm attempting to take on more as well, and it is so. There's something in me that like, there's an emotional resistance in me to doing it, I think, as well. And I don't think I've fully identified what that is. It's not about vulnerability. I don't know. Yeah, I want to introspect on that more. Sometimes it's like, I can't get it out.
Yeah.
But when I name it and do it, it's really, it's like, would you say it's a two-step thing? Just to like break down the sort of formula of it. I think you often start with like what I'm hearing you say is, and then you reflect what the person said in your own words, you kind of paraphrase, and then I think you go on to say, and how that makes you feel.
Yeah, I think this gets a little bit. I try to avoid formulas where possible, because I think then the power of what we do is not necessarily what we do, but like the why of what we do it. And like if I always remember, like my goal here is to connect with the person and to like deepen our like connection in some way. When I come from that place, like regardless of whatever formula I use, like I feel like there's always something that happens beautiful that happens from it. And so the formula, if you did want a formula, would be like, yes, like basically what I heard you say was, and I feel X when I hear you say that. And the reason why I shy away from using a formula is because if people go around and use like this all the time, people are going to be like, well, there's going to be like an awkward feeling about it. Sometimes it's enough to just be like, wow, I feel a lot of joy when you say that. I feel a lot of joy, like as a friend, like, you know, I really celebrate that. Like, this feels like a beautiful opening for you. So don't go with the formula.
I think we all have our own way with words, and you have a certain style about how you do it that resonates nicely. Maybe wrapping up. Couple of questions, I guess. One, is there any like generalizable advice you'd give to people who are looking to find more connection? First question.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two major things. There's like two major parallel tracks that can be followed. So one is like the self-compassion work, and just I highly recommend just IFS therapy or just any sort of therapy, because it really develops this muscle of self-compassion and realizing, man, I'm just a normal human being. And it takes a lot of the weight of loneliness off, of like, I am wrong in some way. And the second is just, it sounds so cliche, but I don't know how else to put it except for like, just think about like hobbies. Like what are you actually interested in, and what groups exist to create connection around that? Hell, it can be like D&D, it can be like bowling, it can be like, you know, whatever else. Anything that gets like you out there and doing something that you like anyways is always going to be good.
Yeah, maybe part B. Maybe I want to ask two-part question. So this feels like great advice for really starting that journey from being quite isolated and lonely. And then there's like, well, once someone has some friendship and connection, but they're like, there's a more deepness I can find, more depth I can find here. What's like? Is there any concise sort of generalizable advice for finding more depth?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think it becomes just developing self-awareness at that point, like realizing more and more, like, what do I genuinely like? Like, what do I genuinely enjoy? And how do I want to show up? Like, there's a question that I sometimes ask myself, like, what type of partner do I want to be? Or like, you know, what type of friend do I want to be? And like, what do I want from my friends? You know, it goes both ways. It's very much both ways. But like when I ask this question, like it becomes much clearer to me, like it becomes a much easier reality check. Like once the criteria are created, I'm like, are my current relationships like actually matching with this? And if not, what do I need to do to synchronize them in some way?
Beautiful. And that could be like a nice journaling exercise, or just an introspection or a conversation. Yeah. Maybe like a group conversation if you have some friends and you're like, how do we want to be friends? Even it could be extended into a group inquiry.
What are we here for? Like, what do we enjoy about it? Yeah, like what do we enjoy about each other? What don't we like actually? Like that's, I think, as informative. And you know, what do we really want out of our continued relating? And it could be like, it doesn't have to be like some highfalutin like we're gonna go save the planet thing. It could literally just be like, I really enjoy talking about like Legos with you, and I want to like have more conversations about Legos, and that alone is enough. It's an intention, and it's been put into the field, and it's something that can be deepened around.
Beautiful. Yeah, and is there anywhere people can find you if they want to find you, and what would you like them to find you for?
Yeah, people can reach out. I'd love to hear if this story resonated in some way, if it was helpful in some way. Like this is like my work I put out into the world. Like as I said, like I struggled with loneliness pretty much my entire life, and even now I still struggle with bouts of it. So it'd be very meaningful to know that I've helped people in some way. People can find me on Instagram. It's at william.mindbody. Just my first name .mindbody.
That's your surname.
That'd be a pretty cool surname. But no, I'm a big like psychosomatic, like mind-body connection geek. So that is my handle, and that's probably the easiest way, I'd say.
IG.
Instagram. That's right.
No website that they can check more about you on, or
The website's under the works. It's not a super high priority. I feel like people get a feeling of me anyways through my Instagram.
right on. Yeah. What kind of stuff do you post on there?
I'm going to be starting to post a little bit more about like a combination of just my general life, of course, as well as just like things that I found personally very helpful for me. Like I feel like, for example, something I learned here that I really want to share is like curiosity is the seed of compassion. Like that actually feels really powerful. Like just recently, it's totally gotten me out of like this major argument with like my partner, with my girlfriend. And it feels like, man, if it can help somebody else out there, great. Fantastic.
Thanks, William. Really enjoyed that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, really enjoyed it too. Yeah, really enjoyed it as well. It was, it's fun. Like really enjoy talking about this material, and there's some insights that emerge from this. And it was great to hear about a little bit more about you too. I didn't realize, this Australia camping trip was like such a pivotal moment in your life.
Oh, the backpack.
Yeah.
Yeah, nor did I actually. I map my life a lot, and that isn't one that often jumps out as like a key moment, but I guess it really was actually. And it was always this great sense of connection with these people, and yeah. So thanks, William. Maybe I'll do a little pan of the environment for the crowds watching on the. This has not died yet. Incredible. Well, this is Chicken Villa. This is a little taste of Bali life. It's on the outskirts of Ubud, which is a wonderful little town with a very unique flavor. I think the kinds of things we're talking about here on the pod are things that people explore in this town. So come here and meet Will. Or me. I might be gone in a month or two, but thanks for being here. This is the road to connection. Pleasure, Will. Alrighty, cut. Ding.